Hello history lovers and welcome back. So recently we saw the release of the Jeanne Du Barry film starring Johnny Depp as King Louis XV and May Wen as the titular character of Jeanne Du Barry. But who was she really? How much did the movie get right? And should it be put as historic fiction like Bridgerton? If you're new here, I would really appreciate it if you subscribe. Don't forget to like this video and share it with a friend. So, quick disclaimer, there will be some awful pronunciations in this video, as there are a lot of French names and words in this script. I have anglicised them where I can, but please do bear in mind, I got a B in French GCSE and I haven't used it since. Madame Jeanne Du Barry was one of King Louis XV's most infamous mistresses, along with Madame Pompadour. Jeanne Du Barry was born Marie Jeanne Bécu on the 19th of August 1743. We think that Marie Jeanne was the illegitimate daughter of Anne Bécu, a seamstress and a monk called Jean-Jacques Gomard de Vaubeneur. Questionable pronunciation, but let's go. Although we know who her mother was, the father is a bit more dubious, but that's what we're going with for this. Jeanne was a commoner and lived in a town located in the Lorraine region of France. When Jeanne was young, she and her mother moved to France in the company of Monsieur Billiard du Montcieux, a financier and supplier to the Royal Army. I'm inferring that he and Jeanne's mother were having a relationship as he paid for her education in a convent run by nuns of the Saint Or. I mean, it's not uncommon for people to have sponsors, but I'm not really too sure if she showed any academics worthy of being sponsored. So that's just my little opinion on the matter. Marie Jeanne was a great lover of the arts, and when she gained influence later in her life, she was a patron to various painters, craftsmen, and helped to nurture the neoclassical style at Versailles. In 1758, at the age of 15, Jeanne left the convent, and now in need of an income, she started to sell trinkets in the streets of Paris. Throughout her life, Jeanne's beauty was noted. She had blonde hair with thick ringlets and bright blue eyes, and she had many different jobs. She once served as a companion to an elderly woman, Madame de Dely de la Garde, and for a time she worked in a haberdashery shop. Jeanne was dismissed from de la Garde's service as she started having an affair with two of Lagarde's sons. The job that Jeanne was notable for was her sex work. Her beauty got her into Paris salons where she could become friendly with many aristocrats who frequented court. This would work to her advantage in 1763 when Jeanne's beauty attracted the attention of Comte Jean-Baptiste Du Barry. Du Barry was a casino owner and Jeanne became his mistress. Du Barry was crucial to establishing Jeanne's career at court, and he gave her the name of Mademoiselle Lange. Through Du Barry, Jeanne was introduced to numerous aristocratic men, including Treasurer of the Royal Navy, Maximilien Radix de Sainte-Foy, and the Duc de Richelieu, the latter of whom Jeanne took on as a client. On the 15th of April 1764, the official mistress of King Louis XV, Madame de Pompadour, died from TB at the age of 43. Her death now meant that the position for official royal mistress, or maîtresse en titre, was now open. Jeanne would go on to break convention, as Louis's mistresses up until now would be either of the highest aristocracy or of the highest ranks of the moneyed class, like Madame de Pompadour. In 1768, Jeanne visited Versailles with her client Duc de Richelieu, and it was on this visit that she caught the eye of King Louis XV. Jean-Baptiste Du Barry noticed the king's interest in Jeanne and essentially became Jeanne's pimp from then on in. King Louis's wife and Queen Marie died on the 24th of June 1768. With Marie and Pompadour dead, Louis was now a lonely 58-year-old man, who was now captivated by the much younger and very beautiful Jeanne. However, there was a problem. You see, Jeanne couldn't qualify as a royal mistress because she didn't come from noble birth or have lots of money. When the king was informed that he could not have Jeanne as a mistress, he reportedly said, "So what? Let someone marry her promptly so that one could keep me from having an indiscretion." However, Jean-Baptiste du Barry had a cunning plan.
Don't worry, Mr. B. I have a cunning plan to solve the problem.
In order to be a chief mistress, Jeanne needed a title. Du Barry solved the problem by arranging a marriage for Jeanne to his brother, Count Guillaume de Barry, which now made her a countess. Jeanne and Guillaume wed on the 1st of September 1768 in the parish of Saint Laurent. He even added extra flair by creating a fake birth certificate for Jeanne, making her of fictitious noble descent, and for some reason made her 3 years younger than what she was. I mean, was that really necessary? It's like that pensioner on GMB that identified as being someone in their 40s. It's like, that's fine, but it still doesn't change how long your body's been on this earth for. Anyway, Jeanne was now married to Count de Barry. He didn't have any influence at court, but it gave Jeanne a title and that's all she needed. Countess du Barry could now be introduced to King Louis XV, who was smitten. Jeanne was formally presented at court on the 22nd of April 1769 as the king's official mistress, and her beauty dazzled everyone, much to the distaste of the Duke of Choiseul, who had been hoping to install his sister, the Duchess of Gramont, in the role instead. Prior to being presented at court, Jeanne was rather lonely, as she was unable to be seen with the king until her presentation, and very few, if any, noblewomen would actually acknowledge her because of her background. As the chief mistress, she was assigned luxurious apartments in Versailles and other royal residences. In Versailles, she was on the 2nd floor and allocated 14 rooms, with a bathroom with 2 tubs, one for washing and one for rinsing, and reportedly there was even running hot and cold water. There were several entrances to the numerous reception rooms, including one stairway that connected directly with the king's chambers, just below her own on the 1st floor. Very soon, she started reaping the perks of her position, being given jewellery and estates that included the Louveciennes estate, where she stayed frequently. She was also a personal friend of Voltaire, whom she visited regularly until his death in 1778. As a sign of his affection, King Louis also gave Jeanne a slave named Zamore, whom she dressed in elegant clothing. Jeanne liked Zamore and gave him an education. Zamore would bring Jeanne a cup of chocolate every morning, and an example of Jeanne's extravagance, as chocolate was extremely expensive at the time, not like the Freddos you can buy from the co-op now. After her cup of chocolate, she would be dressed, have her hair done, and receive friends. Jeanne was good-natured, and she would support tradesmen and the arts. But as the centre of attention at court, she wore expensive, extravagant gowns and diamond jewellery, and would often spend more than her monthly allowance. Her spending and influence over the king, and her rise from being a commoner, did not make her popular at court. Her beauty didn't help, as it caused the other ladies at court to be jealous, which alienated potential friends. On the 15th of May 1770, the royal family gathered for dinner to celebrate the wedding that would take place the next day between the Dauphin Louis and Marie Antoinette. This dinner would be the first time that Madame du Barry and Antoinette would meet. It was believed that Jeanne would not be invited to the dinner given her common birth, and would yet again stand out from the crowd due to her appearance. When Marie Antoinette found out that Jeanne was King Louis's mistress, she was disgusted, and she refused to speak to her. Marie Antoinette and the Dauphin Louis were wed on the 16th of May 1770. Marie would keep to her word of not speaking to Jeanne, for a while at least, but when her mother Maria Theresa of Austria learnt about the two women's hostility, Maria Theresa told her daughter to acknowledge Madame du Barry, to help secure her position and gain support from the king. Marie Antoinette and the Dauphin had not consummated their marriage, which meant it could be annulled at any time and ruin Austria's interests at the French court. Ironically, if it had, it may have just saved her life. Duke Choiseul had spent his efforts of the last 2 years in trying to get rid of Jeanne Du Barry as the king's mistress, and with the Dauphine's dislike of her, the two made an alliance. It was most likely Choiseul who spread the information about her being low-born. Choiseul's plan ultimately backfired when Jeanne snitched on him to the king about making allies with Spain and Britain behind the king's back, and he was dismissed at the end of 1770, although some sources say it's 1771. At the New Year's reception on the 1st of January 1772, Marie Antoinette finally surrendered on her silent treatment. She casually turned to Jeanne and merely commented, "There are a lot of people at Versailles today." It was enough for Madame du Barry, who was satisfied with this recognition. Despite the rumours at court, the king continued to show his love for her with gifts, which included the infamous diamond necklace, which is commonly associated with Marie Antoinette. I'm not going to go through the story, but the necklace was commissioned by King Louis XV in 1772 for Madame du Barry. The necklace had over 600 diamonds and was so expensive to make it caused the jewellers to go bankrupt. However, King Louis XV would die before the necklace was finished, and Jeanne would never get to wear it. 2 years later, King Louis XV died from smallpox on the 10th of May 1774. His grandson became King Louis XVI, and the Dauphine Marie Antoinette was now Queen of France. Upon the death of King Louis XV, Madame du Barry was disgraced and banished from Versailles. She was sent to the Pont aux Dames convent in Meaux. Yes, where she stayed for 2 years. After her 2 years were done, she was allowed to leave the convent and she retired to Château-le-Vicine. Interestingly, she did not return to her husband, but I think it's pretty clear what their relationship was like. King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette still shunned her, and so she was forced to use the wealth that King Louis XV had given her, and she led a quiet life along the River Seine. It was here that she was visited by new lovers. Most prominent among them was Duc de Brissac, the governor of Paris. In 1792, Jeanne made several trips to London, most likely to provide aid to French migrants. On the 9th of September 1792, Duc de Brissac was arrested for treason and imprisoned at Orleans. He was killed by a mob as he and other prisoners were crossing through Versailles. The French Revolution had arrived, and as the political situation got worse, France would behead their king on the 21st of January 1793. Despite being shunned from the aristocracy and the royal family, Jeanne Du Barry was arrested on the 22nd of September 1793 for treason. At first incarcerated in the prison of Saint-Pelagie, she was later transferred to the conciergerie. The widowed former Queen Marie Antoinette was on trial in mid-October. She was convicted by the Revolutionary Tribunal of high treason and executed by guillotine on the 16th of October 1793. Jeanne would follow her rival to the guillotine on the 8th of December 1793, during the Reign of Terror. Jeanne Du Barry was 50 years old. Her last words were, "De grâce, monsieur, le bourreau, encore un petit moment." Please, Mr. Executioner, just a little moment longer. Jeanne Du Barry was executed with her Flemish bankers, the Van den Veers, father and 2 sons. She became a famous victim of the Reign of Terror during the French Revolution. Her body was buried in the Madeleine Cemetery. The gem she had smuggled into London in 1792 was sold at auction in 1795. Jeanne Du Barry was the last mistress of King Louis XV. She rose from modest origins to become one of the most powerful women in France. Through her love of art, she commissioned a daring new construct, the Pavillon de la Musique, which overlooks the River Seine, and it is now thought of as the prototype of French neoclassicism. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. But until the next one, have a wonderful day.